For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Like, of course, there's so many riveting calls to the cost of discipleship that Jesus gives. And that's why it exposes this idol of safety. Welcome back to Jesus versus America. Jesus told us that we couldn't follow two masters or serve them, but we're always trying to follow Jesus and also the dictates of the American culture. I'm John, and I'm joined by my good friends Monique and Wisdom, and together we represent three generations that are trying to faithfully follow Jesus. One of the goals of our podcast in general is to try to peel apart the influence of the American culture from the faith that we're trying to follow, and especially trying to follow Jesus. And so we're looking at different idols that we have in the American culture, different values that we have that we escalate to kind of ultimate authority in our lives, and how they then creep into the church and the kind of results they might have. So the idol we're going to look at today is safety. And it does seem that that is a very high value in the American culture. And I want to be clear, that's a good value. Safety's a good thing. Like, I don't think anybody's going to stand up and say that safety's bad. Our definition of idol is one that Tim Keller used to use, which is when you took something that's good and make it ultimate. When you actually take something that's good and you begin to put it higher than everything else. Yeah. And, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, it may be great for the culture, but is it always the best thing when we marry it with our Christian faith? So let's just start with thinking about how safety expresses itself in the American culture. Maybe the first one is like, we have an entire department within the federal government that's focused on consumer safety and safety. And we've got other agencies that are worried about like medicinal safety and all those kinds of things. So it seems like it's kind of not just embedded. We have actual expressions of things that we, even at a government level, focus on. Like, I think I want to drive a car that's safe, right? Like, I want to know that it's safe, right? Like, I want to know the tires aren't going to blow when I get them.
We want to know elevators have been serviced.
Yeah. Like checking the license. Like last time it was checked on the elevator.
When you get in, you want to know that, but there's a good side of this, which is I think in our society, because there's so much emphasis on safety, I tend to trust things, right? Yeah. I don't think like when I get in the elevator, like this thing could go at any time. That's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, why is it going to take so long?
Faith daily.
Yeah. Our worst complaint is this is a slow elevator. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Where you think the first time it, like shakes a little bit, you think, oh no, like I don't think that way. I just think it's safe. It has to be. Somebody checked this, right? Yeah. That's usually how it is. What about you guys? What are other examples of safety that we have in the American culture that you see?
American safety?
Yeah.
Oh, alarm systems, the Second Amendment.
I didn't even think of that one.
Neighborhood watch.
Yeah. The drills that we do, like regularly.
Earthquake drill. Yeah, that type of thing at school.
We used to do nuclear war drills. Like that was going to do anything if you got under your desk. We were like,
all right, Jenna.
There was like, I don't even know. Yeah, that is a generational
Go to
thing.
your bomb bunker and get your.
No, not even that.
It was the same as the earthquake one.
Really?
Yeah,
like,
it was
what's that going to do?
Like you're gonna. It was the same thing. Like in case of nuclear war, you get under your desk. Like if there was a nuclear war,
which really shows that sometimes the idea of safety is really just an idea in your head that makes you feel better.
Yeah. It's like safety theater, right? Like when you go to the airport, they make you take your shoes off, right?
Yeah.
There was one guy like 20 some years ago who tried to sneak a bomb in his shoe, and it probably wasn't even that effective. Right. So now we're all millions.
That's why we do that.
You didn't know that? Yeah, they found like explosive powder in the sole of his shoe. Yeah. So now we all take our shoes off.
Millions and millions and millions of people every year have to take off their shoes because of one guy, Man. There was an underwear bomber. How come we don't have to do that?
Stop.
There
You're going to give them ideas.
There was a guy, if the TSA is listening, that was just a joke. But for everybody else, there was a guy who tried to sneak on like chemicals in his underwear and it didn't work very well.
At what cost?
Yeah. At what cost? But we go through this thing now where you put your hands up and it scans you. So maybe that's what that's about. But
there's a new thing I'm hearing more and more about. I mean, it was going on 10, 15 years ago, but now it's like everywhere, like to be in a safe place. Like you need to be safe to hear different things that you might disagree with, or I want to be safe. Like,
space.
Right. This is a safe space. This is safe. Everybody's safe. I mean, that is a big American value.
Or the safety of like-mindedness.
Oh,
God forbid.
But those are on like two different aisles, like parts of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
There's like, everybody needs to be in a safe space. We can't say anything that might trigger anybody in any way. And on the other side, like I need the safety of everybody agreeing with me.
So that I can say all the things and think all the things
and I'll
that I
sort
want
myself to a
without
state
challenge.
where all the like-minded people are, right? Like that's part of it. Yeah. Safety from others, safety from foreigners. Like there's safety all over the place, right?
Yeah.
We're always looking for that thing. And I think about it, look, it makes sense that the seatbelt holds, right? It makes sense that the airbags deploy.
Right.
It makes sense that like if I eat that food, like I'm not going to get E. coli or something. And when it happens, I like the fact that they rush out there and they recall everything and they tell you about it, or hey, your car has a defect in it that we didn't know about. Like we're going to recall all of them to be safe. I think it's good that we have that kind of safety. But, it can also, even in the American culture, become kind of its own cult in a way of being so obsessed with safety that we can't live. And I think this is a recent thing. Before I even talk about the church, this is fairly recent in our culture. Like if you look at the history of America, before World War II, I'm just drawing an arbitrary line. I don't think those people were worried about safety. They did some pretty unbelievable things. People took risks. They conquered frontiers. They died for things that even in inventing things that we all now take for granted, people gave their lives trying to come up with stuff and do stuff. So it does seem like a recent American value.
Obsession.
Yeah, with like staying safe. Like this idea we've adopted, like nobody should die, nobody should get hurt. I'm generally in favor of that.
But also, wouldn't you say that those measures were taken from stories happening, like things happening, like the shoe guy, the shoe bomber, like this is why the airports are different. With movie theaters, like I wonder, I do not enter a movie theater the same as when I did when I was younger because of the amount of horrific things that have happened in movie theaters with gun violence and whatnot. So now I'm like paranoid in a movie theater on a Tuesday night, So like, would you say that there's in one sense, as it is an idol, there's some things of like, oh, well, I understand where that came from because something had happened and we are not the same anymore since then. Since Sandy Hook and whatever, now school security has to be different because
since Columbine.
Let's
take it way back.
Exactly. So like you can think of the stories that have actually happened, the actual tragedies that have informed how we move forward.
I think so, but I would, and this is just a guess, I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to say that if you go back 100 years and you had a school shooting, maybe nothing would have changed. They would have just said that's part of life. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying that we seem to have grown into a need for safety in the recent years where we adopted a view that safety is paramount, no one should die, nobody should be hurt. I'm kind of glad about that. Like I said, I get in the elevator, I don't think about it, right? But it is a recent phenomenon that I don't think took place back then. Look at the way, like when you go into a store and somebody's mopping the floor in a store, they start putting cones all the place and wet floor and all these things, right? If you go back again 100 years, if you walked into a store and somebody was mopping and you slipped and fell, the store owner would yell at you. Go, get out of my store, you idiot.
But now, if you slipped and fell, that's a lawsuit.
Right.
That can
now
happen.
You slip and fall, they put more cones around you. Oh, stay on the ground, stay on the ground, like, and so I think our cultural attitude has shifted more towards safety. It's become a bigger value is what I'm saying. It's become even more of something we rely on, which is fine because that's the American culture.
We drive with dash cams on the front and the back now because of things happening. It
just seems like more and more like if somebody, like they eat something they shouldn't have eaten, before you'd be like, oh, you should have checked that. Now it's like it's somebody else's fault. We're all worried about it. Like they have a peanut allergy, they have this, like there's all sorts of things. And again, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying that's a value in the American culture. I live in the same like fishbowl you all do. We all just swim around in this water and it's normal. But then it starts to kind of just seep right into the church, right?
Yeah.
Where we take that value from the culture. And again, I don't want to have kids be unsafe just because they're in church. But if we make safety the paramount concern, we begin to worship at the idol of safety.
Yeah.
And the real question is
at the cost of many things.
Yeah. Is Jesus safe? Is is our faith safe? Like if the seed of the church is the blood of the martyrs, did that end at a certain point? Like that just ended? The church is doing fine. Yeah. We need no more martyrs. We know nothing else. We want everything to be safe.
It wasn't safe. The Son of Man had no place to lay his head.
Yeah.
Like he said, if you're going to follow me, like this is what it's going to be.
Yeah.
It's not comfortable. It's not safe.
And when I see it creep into the church, it gets kind of weird, right? Like we are talking about, we're starting to look at others and create fearful like situations. Like we need to fear others, right? Yeah. As opposed to love others, right? Or even love enemies. Like we're like, no, they're not safe though. I understand. I don't know when enemies were ever safe. Like, I don't know if at any point in time, the enemies in Jesus' time, they're all safe. They were using Nerf guns. They were all safe in Jesus' time, but now it's gotten different.
But even and maybe this is an American value, the tendency to label someone who is different or thinks different than you an enemy, that in itself, like I feel like we've brought an enemy and slapped it on literally everything to insulate ourselves from everything.
Yeah, but if you feel like your white Christian America is disappearing and it's under threat, they are an enemy just because they don't fit those words, They might be like a Christian, but of some other, and you think, I don't know, that already seems different. It's changing things for me. Yeah, we are demagoguing others. We're doing these things in a way that's not at all the way of Jesus, right? Yeah. But I think it shows up in innocent ways in the church. Like, where do you see safety in the church? Like, where is that American idol of safety crept into the church?
Right now I'm going through like live scanning and background checks for all youth leaders, and you got to do all the government, fill out all the forms and whatnot, and that's something that's new and compared to my upbringing in youth when I was a youth student. It was kind of like whatever person was willing to help put on Friday night youth group, and so me figuring out all this paperwork and scheduling the live scan is like, that's something that's emerged in the church, and not something that I'm against by any means, but it's a new part of the church culture now that you got to vet and background check all your
which is
we welcomed everybody, including some creepy people who did some bad things, right? So maybe we learned a lesson and thought, okay, maybe we do need some of this, right? But do you, when you're doing that as a prudent thing to do for youth ministry workers, do you think this is the most important thing about a person in youth ministry, is that they're background checked and fingerprinted? I mean, do you look at their character? You look at other things?
It ain't small.
It ain't small. I'm not gonna be like, no, it's not, because of the stories behind it, like the tragedies
and even
that
is not gonna guarantee, right? But like, for me, when I think about like the physical safety of a human being in that sense, like protecting them, God forbid the worst would happen, that they would be abused in any kind of way, or a predator is trying to dress themselves up in sheep's clothing and enter a place around the vulnerable, which children are vulnerable. That is an important thing. So I wouldn't even look at that necessarily as like the American culture has infiltrated. Like, to me, that's just intelligence. Like, if we have the ability to take these checks and balances and take the time to try to vet out predators, is a great thing. To me, the thing that bothers me is like the idea of safety when it's more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like elusive, like just more like an idea of things that make you feel safe that have nothing to do with like your physical well-being. So like, in other words, if my kid is around another kid with a different political ideology that they talk about it because their families vote different, my kid is being exposed to unsafe ideas or are seeing like unsafe examples of other ways that people live. It's the imagined, the perceived, that's like a new thing in American culture where now it's like not just a danger of our body, it's a danger of the mind, which is so scary, because there is book banning and book burning, and like we are drawing lines, and we're not going out into communities and loving people and welcoming them. We're insulating ourselves to keep out people that are different, because there's this new idea that mental and intellectual safety is necessary, as opposed to like prepare your kid. Safety. Well, just like prepare your kid for the fact that like the world is so different and you're going to encounter these things, and you can explain like what values you might want to set for your family, but it goes beyond like people are different and now it's like it's unsafe it's going to somehow tarnish us from the inside.
But it is unsafe in the same way that if you kept your kid from any germs, the first infection they get is going to kill them, right? All right. And this is what we're doing to our kids, is like we're trying to cloister ourselves into safe places where the world cannot get in any way, where they can't meet any different ideas, where they can't even learn to level up a little bit and learn how to think about ideas and think about things at different worldviews and ideas. And then you think, what? I got to keep them in that bubble the rest of their life. Or when they go out there, their faith just blows up, right?
Right.
Because I tried so hard not to have a single germ enter my
Yes.
little safe,
Which is
clean room.
It's such a weak faith, honestly. Like, you're not rooting your kids in anything deep when you do that. And the danger of insulating yourself in that way for the sake of safety is you start to also assume that the Christian label, like, you may be trusting it more than you should, because just because someone calls themselves a Christian, or it's at a church, or it's a Christian event, or a Christian actor, or whatever, like, slap
I think
the
that's
label.
the
You think
motive
it's
behind where and I'm a product of this, is churches starting schools. So I went through a K through 12 school that was church, founded by its host church, and eventually I ended up going to that church. And so it was this idea of, like, we need to be in control of where our kids go to school, because God knows what they're teaching in public school. And so K through 12, I would go there, and I remember being like, this is kind of strange. I see these people Monday through Friday, and then Friday night I go to youth group with the same people in my class. And also my math teacher is my youth pastor, and then I'll see them all on Sunday, and the sermon is being given by the principal.
Right.
And it's kind of this thing of, like, creating this insular world that keeps you safe from one another.
But what I was saying is, the danger to that is that you are trusting something because it's Christian, when that will fail you. And there are abusive things that happen, and predators within the church. There are people that are call themselves Christian. And if you feel like that label makes you feel falsely safe, and you're not going to question it because it falls into your set of values and what you imagine that to be, you might actually be accepting a very toxic environment, or make yourself more vulnerable to being hurt, because just because something is Christian doesn't mean it's good for you.
You can't
or
automatically
safe.
say it's safe.
No, but people will trust more, which to me even invites bigger instances of predators trying to come into
it was
that
Jesus that
environment.
warned us against wolf in sheep's clothing. That saying comes from Jesus about people who come into the church to do the very things we're describing. And so they are going to be there. And if we just are blindly saying, like, it's safe. But I mean, we see it everywhere. Like, I've always said, like, Christian, the word Christian is the adjective that actually denigrates the noun it always qualifies. Like, it always makes it worse. Like, there's media, and then there's Christian media, which is worse.
I was just talking about this earlier today.
There's like music, and then there's Christian music, which makes it
There's
worse.
rap, and
like,
then there's Christian rap,
which makes it,
Listen, business, and then there's Christian business, and it's
Yeah, and like the one I always think about when I think of safety is Christian radio. Like the actual saying, that the moniker that almost every Christian radio station in America used was "safe for the whole family," and I occasionally listen to Christian music. I just can't take it, because first, it's so safe, it's boring.
Yeah.
It's all the same, because you can't move and go, you can't get creative or actually be a creative artist. Like, nope, it sounds like this. And if it doesn't, there must be something wrong with it.
And it has to be uplifting, and it has to make you feel good.
And
it
the
can't
same
be
chords and the same voice forward, and like all this formula that somebody picked and everybody follows because that's the safe thing to do. But when I would hear "safe for the whole family," actually, the music I could almost take, I can't, but I could have lived with the music. But every single break when they said, whatever the radio station is, safe for the whole family, safe for the little ears in your car, as soon as I heard that, I turned it off, because I thought nothing about my faith should be that safe.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to think that we are worshiping this idol of safety, where I'm on Christian radio. There's a good chance I'm a believer, because otherwise I couldn't stomach this music for anything. Yeah. Don't you think that we could talk about something that's a little bit than just that it's safe for the little ears in my car? Is that your whole mission statement?
With the world as a follower of Jesus shouldn't be marked by safety. Like, Jesus knew that his disciples would experience martyrdom. Like, that was their interaction after the resurrection. And so if your interaction with the world outward, so now we're talking about, different ideologies and different people groups, it shouldn't be marked by safety. Your representation in the world should not mark for a safe life. It doesn't. Listening
to something that says they're family friendly, when Jesus said, like, anyone who does not leave mother, brother, sister, like where's family friendly come from, right?
Right.
When we are all brothers and sisters in Christ, we give our lives over to Jesus, and that's more important than family. But you've elevated, like, this safety and this family to the very thing. And then, I think about it, I go, like, are our churches safe? like with their congregational mobs and their divisions and their political things and all the things that make us more American than Christian. Like,
Right.
are they safe? So like,
No, like,
why are we looking for these
That's
places?
such a good point, because the more you try to make it safe for yourselves, like the people attending, right, the less of a safe place it feels like to those that would maybe otherwise seek God but are afraid to step into that because they know exactly what it's become.
Yeah. I mean,
They know they're not welcome.
The problem with Christian bubbles is you're stuck inside, and the world is that you're supposed to reach is outside,
Outside, yeah.
right? That's the problem with Christian bubbles. And then it gets really, really incestuous and crazy inside. So it's not
Yeah.
even like it's doing
Yeah.
great. So you're trying to cloister yourself from the world and save yourself.
It can't be self-reflective, and it can't be healthy from that, with a healthy amount of pushback when you're insulated to that degree.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that goes down. But it is in our churches all the time. Like I see it when we just, I mean, we sing it. Like I was thinking, we've even brought this up on the show before. That song, Firm Foundation. You know, it's almost like
that song.
I just, you know what?
You
I
roast
like that song
every
could,
other
like
podcast.
if we could find just a way for them to come and on the show and explain to us what they meant when they wrote this, right? Yeah, like could you just come on? This is the part that always gets me. Rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. Actually, the house that Jesus talked about being built on the rock was built on obedience to him, not just him. I'm safe with you.
I'm gonna make
it through. I'm gonna make it through because I'm standing strong on you. Like half of that is true, but to actually be singing week after week that I'm safe with you, it's
'cause what does
forming
it
our
mean?
souls in a way, right?
Yes, because you are now associating the goodness of God or the strength of your faith or like who God is with your actual physical safety, which is not a bibiblical
Yeah.
thing.
What if
and
they're
is
talking about
never
emotional safety?
and
Like,
it's never
Only
been
Gen
promised.
Z could think of safety in terms
and
of
that's what I'm
emotional
here
safety.
for. Because it's like, yeah, like what if they're talking about emotional safety?
Yeah, that's not the people who wrote this song. They're all millennials. They're-
Well, I mean,
No, but what if that's what they're thinking? Like, if I'm thinking of what I heard was like,
no, because the rain came and the wind blew, and those are not emotional.
That's
Right.
fine. That's
Right.
fine. But like,
Right.
maybe I'm safe with you means like I can trust you with my hurt.
You know what? If that's the thing, if you have to spend like, you know, either fine print or 3 minutes before a worship song explaining what it means,
Yeah.
you're already losing because
Sure,
most
sure,
people
sure,
are
sure.
already gonna misunderstand
Yeah.
half the things you say in church.
Right.
But if it's that like nuanced to try to get it right,
I mean, that's
you know?
what I heard when I
Yeah.
saw those lyrics
Yeah.
as a
But, I mean,
Gen
It's
Z.
yeah,
Gen Z,
just-
right?
yeah.
But like, just imagine walking around and this is the message we're giving, and this is the song that you're singing, and you really think that if you have God, you are safe. And what happens when something happens to you or someone that you love? What happens to your
Exactly.
faith? Because this is not something that was ever promised or guaranteed. Quite
Yeah.
the opposite. You will face struggle. That's what the Bible says. Like, you will.
And this is guaranteeing that he'll never fail. He won't, but that doesn't mean that you're
That
gonna make it
you-
through,
right.
right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
might
yeah.
not
Yeah.
make
Right.
it.
And
Yeah,
not-
right,
and-
right. But
and
you're
the-
still like, you know,
and
you're
the
not going to
idea
fail.
that-
I'm not
Like,
making it through.
if something doesn't go my way, that means God failed, which is also not
Right.
theologically sound or
Right, but if you
biblical.
live in the idolatry of safety, like you think, well, if something isn't safe, something went wrong, or God didn't show up, or he wasn't there, and that's where these things come in. I went looking for places where I thought, where does the church actually not worship at the idol of safety?
Yeah.
And I was interested because I've seen so many things like Christian radio and Christian media and Christian movies and Christian schools and homeschooling is a whole thing, right? Like where your bubble is even smaller. It's not even a group of Christians. It's like you and your mom, you know, like it's all of those things. So I went looking like, okay, so where do we not, where do we even preach against the idol of safety in the church? Like is someone doing sermons on this or whatever? And I found a whole group of messages that said Christians are not supposed to be safe. And I thought, oh, that's very interesting. Where is that? And it was all about COVID and mask wearing. That was where all of these things came from. So Christians were worshiping at the idol of safety, safe for the little ears, safe, you know, like editing movies so you didn't
but
see anything
only with
objectionable.
this one thing, just show up without your mask
Right.
and have
Yeah.
faith.
That's where like like you were going to just live on the wild side, you know, like, and go, Jesus never called us to be safe, except for my Christian school, my homeschooling, but mask wearing, Jesus would not have approved of.
When it's political,
Right.
And to be fair, it's not just Christian culture that tends to do this. I talked to someone, a mom of one of my students. Oh God, they'll never see this. Anyways, one of my students says, well, you know, I'm very political, so I'm thinking of now homeschooling my children. So it's not even just about like the religious thing anymore.
Right.
Yeah. A place I feel like the church takes away the safeguards is with their pastors and their speakers. Like they don't safeguard. I feel like the safety check is for like I know the students and those dealing with minors, but I've never heard of one for your speaker, like a background check on them. And then even more so like a educational check on them. We kind of just put whoever we want, like a big personality or big charisma up there, but there's no safety check on the person at the pulpit comparatively to those in our classrooms and
I know
with minors.
And that's why look, there needs to be a lot more accountability in those places, right? Like it is strange but again, that's because another idol wins out. Our idol of celebrity or our idol of certain things wins out even over our idol of safety. Like not all these idols are equal. Like we rank them even though they're idols, and I think they shouldn't be. It does get kind of interesting. Like first of all, so I use the mask wearing thing, which is surprising or not, as the only place you might think, because I do think that what we end up doing is even when we know that we shouldn't worship at the idol or the altar of safety, most of us from our own upbringing know that you should only go to a certain point in your following Jesus. Beyond that, it's just not safe. Like I want you to follow Jesus wholeheartedly, but to a point. Or you might hear somebody like, I heard my whole life from my own family, like, don't take this too far. Like, don't go crazy. Like, don't, this shouldn't cost you financially.
Don't go to a part of the city or a part of the world that is dangerous. Don't.
Yeah, should we follow Jesus when it's like financially challenging? Like my own upbringing, even Christian upbringing, even church upbringing, even my Christian friends would be like, hey, don't take it too far. Like, right? So there's a safety implicit in the advice we get from people who go, well, listen, I mean, you know, you need a good retirement, so don't go crazy with your giving, you know? Or maybe you shouldn't go somewhere like that. That's not safe physically. Like you might be harmed if you did that, right? And those are the kind of things that I think even well-intentioned Christians don't know that they're worshiping at this idol of safety. When we try to say like don't take us too far. Like we want God to love us unconditionally and to provide for us unreservedly. But in exchange, like we want a discipleship that doesn't have a cost, you know, or that doesn't ask too much of us, including our own life. And of course, we know Jesus is going to say something different. So I'm looking at
God
this.
forbid we give anything up to.
Like so in Luke, Jesus says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." The cross was not a religious instrument. It was an instrument of execution. Jesus today would have said, like, anybody who wants to follow me must wheel around their electric chair or bring along their guillotine. You know, he's got to say something shocking to his people because they knew the cross, not as a religious symbol. It was an instrument of death and torture and intimidation. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet lose or forfeit their very self? Like, of course, there's so many riveting calls to the cost of discipleship that Jesus gives. And that's why it exposes this idol of safety. Later on, the Apostle Paul went on these missionary journeys, and he did not find safety. In fact, he described it this way in 1 Corinthians. And actually, I think this is 2 Corinthians. It's probably miscited. It says, 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was pelted with stones. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. And now look at all the safe words he uses. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, and in danger from false believers. I have labored and toiled and often gone without sleep. I have known hunger and thirst and have gone without food. I have been cold and naked. And besides everything else, I face daily the pressure of my concern for all the churches. There's no safety in that, right? And this is the person who started the missionary movements that God used to take Christianity to the ends of the earth, right? It seems weird to be able to do a Christianity without cost or that is completely safe. It just seems like it would not only be boring, but ineffective.
To be fair, and this is going along with the don't take it too far, maybe, but we aren't to treat our body with abandon either. Right. So to be fair, like we're not saying treat your body with abandon, don't treat it like a temple, don't care for your, I mean, it almost is like it could be considered a mental illness when you no longer care if you live or die, right? Like there is a healthiness to the preservation of life. It's the most basic instinct that we have. That's like an important instinct. So there is a distinction here of what we're saying and what we are not saying.
We're just talking about which one wins. That's how you know if it's an idol, right?
Right.
Like even Jesus, who knew before the foundation of the earth and the world and the creation, that he was going to die as a plan of salvation, right? Ask the Father if there's any way that we not do this.
Right. Let's do
Let's
a different
not
way.
do this. Is there
And he's
another
like,
way to
"Nope."
do this? And when the Father basically he says, but not my will, yours.
Yeah.
So even Jesus didn't want to run headlong to the cross. Like, even though he knew that on the other side of it, he'd be raised and all that stuff. It's like, let's not do this if there's a way not to do it. But at the end of the day, my desire to live or my desire to be safe or my desire not to suffer, that doesn't win.
Right.
What wins is whatever the Lord has put before me and whatever his will is.
Which I don't think most people are on the level of going too far in that direction anyway. I think most of us are like, we don't even want to step out of our comfort at all. And it's a lot of made up, I feel like, fear or,
paranoia,
can't be inconvenienced or whatever.
And I like that you said that, because a lot of times when we think of something like, hey, there is something wrong with you just not caring whether you live or die, that's true. But I like that you also pointed out that that's not most of our problems.
Right.
Most of us lean so heavily to our safety and so heavily to a no-cost discipleship and no sacrifice and just like, Jesus did some great things for me, now let me party on because he's got everything else taken care of. We lean so heavily that way. So if you started leaning the other way, I'll let you know as a good friend. I'm like, hey, Monique, like you're taking it too far.
That you are taking it too far.
That doesn't tend to be the story for the Jesus follower in America.
Definitely
We've
not.
never had to pay something like that cost. Like all this talk about persecution, all this stuff. Like go to another country where they're literally beheading people, or they're
that part. Like
it's the Christian industrial persecution complex. That's what we have.
You really don't know what it is, or like how good we have it here, honestly, because true persecution is something most Americans cannot fathom.
I think if you just drop somebody into sub-Saharan Africa and said, okay, now you want to feel persecuted, because they didn't have Merry Christmas on your Starbucks card. Like, well, how about you stay here for a year? And like, let's talk about it. Let's go to like Southeast Asia and see how you fare there. As a Christian. I think that's true. Yeah. So I think that's kind of the point I think we're trying to make, is that we should identify it in ourselves. Again, this is something we have to quiz ourselves. Like, is this something that's so important to me? Do I hesitate when I would think of doing something that really is impactful? When I see the way that faith was expressed in the scriptures, or even in the history of the church and the martyrs and others, do I think, well, that must be for them. It's certainly not for anybody else. Or do I think, wait a minute, that's for everyone. Why am I not living more into the way that this would actually happen?
That. And then what I feel like is the biggest, the label I put onto this idol that I see in American culture is just the like-mindedness idol. So it's like what you were talking about. It's all of that. And then if you find yourself like, I just want to be around like-minded people and a like-minded community with like-minded friends, that's another type of safety obsession that is very dangerous and not, I think, what Christ has ever called us to do.
And I see that on both sides of the ideological spectrum. Like when I'm sitting with like more conservative young adults and Christians, like they tend to get stressed out when you challenge some of those beliefs. But the same is even more true in my experience when you're sitting with more progressive ones and you say, I don't know, the scripture doesn't really support the position you're taking, which by the way was wholesale borrowed from the American culture. Let's look at what the scripture says, and there's a tenseness, like, hold on, I don't feel safe about it. And so I think we should just call that out to say, you know what, the gospel is offensive. And there is a time when we need to separate the truth, and it will be like a sword. It will not be coming in like all safe. It's going to convict, and it's going to be something we do. And I'm not trying to offend. I'm actually not trying to go in there and say like, let's just give them the hard truth. I'm actually saying, as we enter into it and let Jesus speak for himself, you may start to feel.
Can we open ourselves up to the idea that we might read something or learn something about our faith that is going to challenge us to pivot our way of life or our thinking? And that is, and also another distinction, that is important, but using it will be a sword and it will divide to then be divisive and
Right.
put people down and slap them over the head with it and use it as a weapon for your own like point of view. Also, absolutely not. So it's both of those things.
People fall too much to one side or the other. And I
Right.
think the thing, I mean, we could make it a simple, non-offensive one. Like there are people who just don't believe that there's an absolute truth, right? The biblical view is there is a truth, right? And Jesus is the truth. And so if I were to talk to somebody and say, well, look, that's a great American value, or that's a great like post-enlightenment value, or whatever value you're subscribing to, but Jesus's view is different. If someone says to me, well, I don't feel safe about that, I'm like, okay. But I mean, that can't be the idol we say, oh, because you don't feel safe, it must not be true. Actually, we have to make a decision. Jesus could be crazy, he could be wrong. If that's your conclusion, move along. You don't need to see anything else.
Right.
If not, you just have to be open to the idea that there's something more important about truth than, for example, than about safety in this
safety
example.
does not equate to truth.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
we,
Really good.
That.
and
yeah.
if it doesn't
Safety
go,
does not equate to truth.
that might be your idol. That might be the litmus test where it's coming up for you. Like if you are actually looking at what Jesus
That's
says in
so
Scripture,
good.
and you suddenly like go, okay, so you might need to say, wait a minute, where did this thing come from? I know where it came from. It came from the American culture. It's a
Yeah.
good thing. Let's not make it an ultimate thing. Let's not make it so it rules our lives.
Yeah.
Jesus should rule. This is Jesus versus America.
Follow us on all social media platforms at Jesus versus America, and find more resources on our official website, jesusversusamerica.com.